the entire leaderboard double since the last NMG tournament, which was 2 years prior. And to see, from before where we barely even filled the tournament to now when, we actually had a wait list, kind of exciting.
Yeah, there's been a lot of new players that are coming to the scene of this speed run, especially from the randomizer community too, which has been really good to see. And the times have really been broken down. Back when it used to be, 129 was a really good time for top 20, top 30 or so, and now it's just really getting down to being the top 10 is all 124s now, which we just had one the other day, and 125 is a decent time to secure top 20. So this particular run is getting pretty popular fairly quickly.
And speaking of runs, Eriror's run has actually started, and so there's not a lot of things that we can do to save time early on in the game. I think everybody in the NMG, or well, the ALTTP community at large, thinks pumping's pretty funny. But something to kind of explain about Link's movement. When Link is moving left or starting a movement to the left or north, you start at 2 pixels per frame and then alternate between 2 and 1. When you start right or south, I guess those are weird directions to use, it starts with 1 pixel and then alternates to 2. So we like to try to maximize that by mashing the D-pad, which we like to call pumping.
As most in the community would say, the story about pumping.
The story about pumping is it barely saves any time at all.
Pumping saves, if done optimally throughout the entire run, you're looking at right around 6 seconds or so just by pumping. So
I really thought you were going to say 6 years.
I wish it was 6 years, but the more important rooms that pumping really comes into play is a few of the rooms in Escape where Link is in water, just because the water walking animation does slow you down quite a bit. So basically, pumping is mostly used in the first 2 dungeons, Escape and then Eastern, until we get the boots. Then the run really kicks off to get fast.
I see what you did there, Fricker. And that's also a really good point to make, though. Whenever Link's natural movement speed slows down is where you get the most value out of it. So staircases, and as you mentioned before, water, the most useful. And you can actually, on certain staircases, well, pretty much all staircases, mash both D-pad directions and still get the boost. So in theory, you can do it twice as well. I also want to differentiate not these automatic staircases, just the manual staircases.
Yeah, those manual staircases definitely boost your speed when you double pump. Just holding one direction and then just double pumping or double tapping the other 2 directions just to reset Link's speed animation. So,
well, surprised to see that little standoff with the green guard, but otherwise, Eriror doing pretty well throughout his escape sequence here. Unfortunately, picking up the big key before hitting that door, getting an extra text box. Another thing that you see in A Link to the Past NMG that you don't see in, say, Randomizer are text boxes, quite a few of them, in Japanese, of course, and there are lots of ways to mash. Interestingly enough, the last text box can be cleared with L or R, so if you want to make sure you don't accidentally swipe your sword or pick something up or activate something, you can use that for the last box. I gotta ask though, Fricker, is there a specific reason that we use the Japanese 1.0 version?
there's quite a few reasons actually. Obviously, the Japanese text is much faster, but there's a lot of Japanese 1.0 exclusive glitches that we'll see throughout the run here. A couple of them being important ones that are spin speed, which we'll get as soon as we get the boots, and fake flippers, which we'll see shortly as well too. But definitely a huge reason why most people run the 1.0 is just for the exclusive glitches.
And on the subject of glitches, we're still discovering more things that are both intended and unintended mechanics, aspects of the way the game was programmed. I mean, we even had a discovery this year that saved 10 seconds on this run that the community, I guess the randomizer and the NMG communities combined started calling it the spooky action glitch. We might get an opportunity to see that later on. I think Eriror has probably practiced it. But yes, the differentiation between major glitches and minor glitches mostly comes down to whether or not you can skip major content with it. Here in the escape sequence, though, We kind of shoot for a specific benchmark. Usually, we're looking for around a 6-minute escape. That's the sign that you've kind of executed really well. Those snakes, oh my goodness, those ropes are the best RNG I've seen in those in a while.
Yeah, that snake room was pretty ideal for RNG.
Another thing to note about these enemies is that their initial spawn locations are set, but the way that they behave is not. They'll all operate within a certain pool of RNGs depending on the type of enemy and the room that they're in. But for the most part, you're not going to see more than just a few different variations on each room.
Eri getting a pretty good key rat there. Typically, that key rat can run away from you in the northwest section of the room, so he had a pretty good key rat RNG in that one.
So far, mostly good. A rat barely getting in the way, but wisely using a boomerang. If you hold right, leaving that door that he just entered the room from, you actually skip a text box from Zelda, and you can also pull that stat or that switch from the wall, from the left side of it, quite far away, almost kind of as far away as you can activate the pedestal.
So it looks like Eri finished with about a 5:54 escape, which is a very respectable time. Looking forward to this. About to get the boots here soon and headed to the second dungeon, which is Eastern Palace.
It looks like Eriror has opted to spend 3 seconds to get a heart container, also known as Sanctuary Heart. There is some contention in the community about this heart because it's a lot of risk to save 3 seconds, but I am on Eriror's side today. You should definitely pick up the Sanctuary Heart until you decide that you are never going to get hit.
Yeah, that Sanctuary Heart is known as the best safety in the run, for sure. Typically, you'll see maybe 124, a few 125 runners that will skip the Sank Heart, but obviously for speedrun safety, it's definitely a good pick to get the extra heart there, especially going into a few harder bosses coming up in the Dark World.
Helmasaur King comes to mind very quickly. I know I died multiple times trying to incorporate that in my run for that reason. It looks like Eriror has good game knowledge, knowing to boomerang that Armos statue, as that does reduce some lag in this screen.
Yeah, most of this first part, especially without boots, is just a lot of movement and pumping as he goes. So pretty clean overworld movement up till Eastern Palace here.
Here in Eastern Palace, we're going to pick up our first weapon, or I guess dungeon item, which will be the bow. The bow does have some interesting characteristics. One of them is that you can only have one arrow on screen at a time due to Super Nintendo sprite limitations. Basically, they didn't want to program a way for you to overload the screen in that regard. And some items actually use quite a lot of resources in that regard. Uh, but that may become relevant to how we do both the Armos Knights and Lammolis fights, very heavily informing how we're going to actually, set those up. I do like that he picked up the safety arrows there, 5 arrows that we're not going to have an opportunity to pick up on our next pass through that room.
And Eriror is going to be coming up on the first minor trick here in the dungeon. It's called the big key skip or the big key deboost. It's where he's actually going to intentionally take damage from the Popo enemy here, and he's going to use his damaged iframes to be able to pick up the pot in the middle, which is covered by anti-fairy enemies, and be able to hit that without having to kill all the enemies and waste a little bit more time for this chest to appear.
And it's not the end of the world if you mess it up once or even twice. There are a couple of hard pickups that you can get in that room. It's still faster to go after it a second or third time than it is to actually kill all the enemies. But then you could have very low health and you can actually die here. So depending on your skill as a runner, Eriror has done it a million times, so no problems there. I really love the room we're walking into. I doubt that Eriror is going to do it, but there's a really risky strat you can do in this room called Gifted with Greenies, and it saves barely any time, but looks amazing. You try to do the same thing as you did just there to kill the enemy and pick up the key, but you do most of it from the left side of the room with the use of a boomerang. Very volatile strat, but the way that Eriror did is the way that pretty much everybody will actually approach that room.
Next few rooms coming up here is a lot of tricky movement and RNG dependent. That particular room is called Zelda Game Room. Very difficult with many RNGs in it. So just headed up to the boss here. A couple of double Igor rooms, but Armost here, there is a top right strat that's pretty quick, where you set up and fire 5 arrows and then you fire down ultimately to take out the rest of the Armost statue bosses. And he sets it up where the last one is actually already 2 arrows into damage. So he does not turn red, which would regenerate the boss's health. So getting the quick kill on Armos here.
It was kind of unfortunate that we barely missed an arrow drop right as we were about to enter the room. It's still important for us to have a good arrow count, although 4 is certainly fine walking out of Eastern Palace. We'll want to use as many as we can for Lammolis because it's very easy to miss those shots.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The land mollusk fight, and there is 20 arrows, I believe, that Eriror will grab inside the desert palace itself. A lot of them under pots and whatnot. So he'll get a decent, healthy supply of arrows before the next boss fight.
So while it's very likely that Eriror is going to rely upon picking up tree rupees in order to get the rupees we need for later on in the run, you could also go to the back of Sahasrah's house here, or his Eastern temple. I don't know what you would call that, actually. Um, it looks like his house. No, his house is in Kakariko. What would you call that?
This is a good question.
The burning questions of Hyrule. But anyway, you can find 100 rupees back there if you're in a pinch, and you can also do that by mirroring from the Palace of Darkness, hedge maze. If you forget last second that you don't have enough.
Yeah, it's just I believe it's just called Sasha's hut or Sasha Hollow's hut.
Yeah, so there are quite a lot of backup strats in the NMG run. This is a very approachable run if you're new to it. There are plenty of ways you can pick up extra safeties and prepare yourself, for some of the challenging dungeons later on in the game. Right now, we see Eriror picking up the Book of Medora off of the library shelf. We're going to take that and head right back over to Desert.
So what you guys just saw there, and you did see it coming out of Sasha's hut, is the spin speed minor glitch that he'll be using.
Spin speed is a derivation of super speed, which is a class of glitches that we have in A Link to the Past that make Link essentially store the dash speed that you see here when he leaves a manual staircase under certain conditions. You can do this with certain item dashes. You can release a sword spin and hit the dash immediately 1 frame after. And when you walk north or south off those staircases, you'll just be running. You'll be walking as fast as you run.
A couple of extra things with that spin speed or super speed minor glitch that area will be using. Basically, what Eudaimonistic said, you'll be walking at running speed, but you will not be able to use your sword. And if you end up dropping off of a ledge or getting hit by an enemy, that will cancel out the minor glitch state.
Yeah, being that you can just dash to end it, or like as you mentioned, you can do a quick hop off the ledge, which is a nice feature of it actually. You can jump right off of ledges. It could prove perilous later on in this dungeon if Eriror goes after a really dangerous desert spin speed. But there are plenty of ways to test it, and of course, end the glitch. It's very easy to use, and it's pretty much essential for any run of this game.
So just headed through the half of Desert Palace here, just about to get the big key. But basically, the Desert Palace is pretty straightforward. It's just consists of a lot of very tight dashes all the way up into the boss.
You may notice on certain screens Eriror doesn't choose to dash, or you may see him moving diagonals in certain places. These are all calculated movements based on both how long Link is traveling at a certain movement speed and also the time it takes to charge up a dash. Um, when you're dashing, you move at 4 pixels per frame instead of the 2 that you get maximum per frame, even if you're pumping. So you just got to make sure that the time it takes for you to charge up that dash wouldn't be better spent just walking in the first place. If you're close to a screen transition, that is usually the case.
It also did look like that Eriror picked up a few extra rupee drops on the way, which is good. Coming up for his tree rupees, he does need to make sure that he has a total of 110 rupees before heading into the Dark World.
Well, I was impressed to see him do the desert spin speed. That was a scary moment for me. I mean, because if you even touch that ledge, you're basically walking all the way back through the dungeon. But like a pro, he uses a pause buffer to make sure that he's lined up correctly, switching to the lamp and getting into the back half of desert, no problem.
So coming up on the second Light World boss here, the Landmolas, it can be a pretty tough fight. A lot of it is RNG based, just on the directions and pathways that Landmolas will go, along with how long they stay out in the open for you to shoot them. They can have short hops and whatnot, but basically each Landmola takes 4 arrows to kill, and hopefully a runner that's looking to get a low time on this particular dungeon is probably looking for a 3 cycle. So we'll see what he does here.
And walking in with 29 arrows, definitely a good position to be in. Well, got a couple of the first shots, 2 on one of them and 1 on the other. That's a decent first cycle. Unfortunately, the timing of these arrows are kind of proving to be an issue. All things considered, I'd call that a pretty good fight.
Oh, absolutely.
It would personally be a 10 cycle for me, so I mean, I can't complain.
17:10 split time for desert is a pretty good time, even for a 4 cycle. So
Well, there are a couple of different ways to approach exiting the desert. We get a Sandman slash out of Eriror today. We are approaching a minor glitch that Fricker22 mentioned previously, fake flippers. This is a fun one. So this has something to do with the game not checking for flippers if you do a screen transition during the 1 frame that you're able to move while in the water. So we're not supposed to be able to swim here.
yeah, so basically this trick just relies on being able to jump into the water and transition the screen scroll on the same frame. And the fake flipper is a pretty close to being a pixel perfect trick as well. So luckily there's a quite an easy way to set it up, just being able to be on the bottom portion of the mountain and then lining up with the front bush as Eriror did there. So nicely displayed.
One common mistake people make is that they hold the diagonal before they finish, or they don't like buffer the slash first. You kind of want it to start moving diagonally after the slash is completing, instead of while you're doing the slash, because you'll actually mess up the lineup otherwise.
And also a huge thing to mention with the fake flipper minor glitches, because you're in the water and you're swimming without flippers. If you do happen to get hit by an enemy, the game typically will set you on land, but it doesn't know where to put you because you actually glitch to that portion of the screen. So what can happen is you actually soft lock the game.
I mean, if Link ever went to a carnival, that would be the carousel for him. You just scroll around and around and around. And I think there are some possible ways to escape it, but for the NMG tournament, we literally had to allow people to save and quit in that scenario just to make it viable. We're getting some really nice super speed, or I guess spin speed, from Eriror here on the mountain. Also opting to enter the portal, or trying to enter the portal from the right side to line up something called a quick warp. Which if you are on there's 2 of every 8 pixels that you can stand on that will give you a faster screen transition when you warp, saving about half a second each time. Well, with that mirror in tow, we are now on our way through Tower of Hera. We have a favorite room of people in all of ALTTP. A lot of people call this your coffee break. In NMG, no different. We're 20 minutes in, and Fricker, if you wish to, could stand on one of those pegs after hitting one of those switches. You could do a nice boom dash, as we like to call it, an item dash. And you can get infinite invincibility frames. Instead, Eriror is opting to simply just destroy the tiles.
Yeah, it's definitely a safer approach because if you want to be able to get the iframes of the pegs, you have to do a 3 input, pretty much perfect. You have to hit down and then dash and then hit Y all on the same frame to be able to throw your boomerang down and then dash right to get to the pegs in time before they come up. And if you end up accidentally hitting the wrong button or just hitting the boomerang on the switch and not dashing correctly, you'll have to re-hit the switch, and it does waste a little bit of time.
Yeah, and doing an item dash with the boomerang alone, or boom dash as we like to call it, is already difficult enough. Having to do it in a different direction than you're dashing, yeah, I'll pass.
Eriror getting really good RNG in the Beato's room there.
All in all, this dungeon's been very cooperative. I haven't seen anything that's really been, you have to react to so far in the enemies. Oh, we do get to see our first bomb jump coming up here. So Eriror is going to want to get across to that big chest without having to go upstairs. So in order to do so, we place a bomb and stand 2 pixels, at least within 2 pixels away from the ledge, and that'll carry us over. If you dash into the wall alongside it instead and bounce off of that, you can be as much as 6 pixels away.
All right, heading into everyone's favorite boss, Moldorm, which can be pretty tough because he does have a lot of RNG and movement, and you are on a ledge where you can get knocked down.
Holy moly, that's bold. We kind of see Eriror doing what a lot of runners will do, which is pretty much following Moldorm right behind his tail, trying to get the fastest possible hits. Doing a fantastic job of finishing up this fight.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool strategies you can use for Moldorm, as you saw Erir do. Quite a few times he used a dash strat. While he waited for the tail to be exposed and then dashed into it. Also, you can just hold away from the ledge if Moldorm starts to attack you, and you won't fall off, and you'll be able to hit him that way as well.
Well, we have all 3 pendants, so it's time to pick up the Sword of Evil's Bane. On our way to the forest, we will actually do the first of 2 tree pulls. In A Link to the Past, there are 3 different tiers of rewards that you can get for killing enemies and pulling on certain trees within both overworlds. The first is always going to be 4 green rupees. The second the second tier. Oh, I got that entirely wrong. If you kill 4 enemies without taking damage, it's red rupees. Kill 4 enemies with taking damage, it's blue, and anything less than that is green.
That is correct. And on that first tree screen there, you did see Eriror kill 2 enemies. So on the way through the forest here, he did kill 2 more enemies, the bird and the bush crab, which would be 4 enemies without getting hit. So as he gets the Master Sword and makes his way back, he's going to pull a tree in the middle of the forest here, and he's going to get 4 red rupee drops.
He got kind of close there with one of those birds on a bonk, and almost would have had to have done a backup strat, probably pulling a tree in Hyrule Castle, if anything.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a few backups, being able to kill a few guards on the way to Hyrule, going to Aga. And if that one fails, unfortunately, you can just mirror in the pod Palace of Darkness Hedge Maze and be able to get the 100 rupees in Sash's hut.
Well, with the damage boost that we have from the Master Sword, dashing becomes a lot more viable to kill certain enemies. And dashing is going to be important in the castle tower, as there is a reason we will dash through certain guards. Prize packs are a thing that we haven't touched on. Every enemy in this game, all the main enemies, not the bosses, have certain rewards that they can give you. There's a 50% chance of dropping them, and they happen within a certain sequence. There will be certain blue guards that we're going to avoid killing with slashes, because killing with a dash will not give you a prize pack drop. We're going to do that to hopefully get a fairy drop later on in Turtle Rock. Heading through here, though, we're on our way straight up to the castle. We get a nice little fence dash there. It's kind of an automatic one. There's a more important one later, I swear.
Yeah, that one saves about 20 years.
Looking forward to the up and A skill. In the meantime, Aries doing pretty well on rupee count as well, 107, and there's definitely a 5 drop that we can pick up here in the tower.
Yep, in a room towards the end of this tower here, he'll get 6 more rupees in some pots. Area displaying a strat known as the Pui strat. Pui was or I should say, is a Japanese runner of the Link to the Past NMG category. But also, like Udamanus was talking about earlier, he did dash kill those 2 enemies just to preserve a fairy drop for later in the game.
In this room that Aries in right now, it's really key that we don't do any sword beam slashes or dash or bonk into stuff. I mean, we can dash, but we don't want to alert these guards. While he did on the way through, it didn't really lose much time. Typically, they'll get in your way. Just a little bit more bumbling around in the dark. We'll also have a key that we're going to pick up in the next room. We may see an example of Eriror trying to do a key dash, opting to stop right before the door because I don't think he recognized the right pixel to be standing on. But if you're on any increment of 4 pixels on the ground away from the door, dashing through it will actually open it and you can continue the dash.
So for that specific room there, Ari actually canceled his dash on purpose to not hit the key dash because he had beams. If you have beams in that room, you do alert the guard. So if you go for the key dash, you will get arrowed. So he did that purposefully.
Today I learned.
Yeah, there's always new stuff about this game that you learn every day. So there's definitely a lot of knowledge.
That's one thing I do love about it is, and you couldn't have said it any better. You learn something new every day. All right, well, we got a fun fight here. Aghanim, which is the alter ego of Ganon, of course, or Ganondorf, depending on which game in the series we're referencing. Aghanim is somebody we fight twice in this game. The first fight is going to be a 5 attack cycle. The first attack will always be a reflectable shot. 2, 3, and 4 have a 50% chance of being reflectable or a blue ball attack, which wastes time. And the 5th attack will always be a lightning attack, which we can do nothing about, but wait out. Then the whole thing repeats. Being that we need 6 total hits to defeat Aghanim, the worst that you can possibly get if you hit every guaranteed shot is 15 blue balls, which has totally never happened to anybody, right?
Nope, only like twice to one person.
I still think Scrivo needs to buy everybody some scratch-off tickets.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to see 15 blue balls, but he managed to do it a few times.
I believe that was the second one.
I believe so. I thought I saw 3, but it might have been 2. Eriror does have 3 Aghanim blue balls in his current personal best, so he should be right on target.
Yeah, it's always nice to see that you have less in the run that you're currently in. This is a place where runs frequently die. People who have really high leaderboard times, or I guess low leaderboard times in the 125 range, pretty much have to reset runs there a lot.
It looks like Eriror is going to get out of here. Definitely sub 30 into the Dark World Sword up here. 29:30 is a fantastic time. So it looks like Aries on pace to have a really good run here coming up.
We'll get to see another use of spin speed. Well, actually, it didn't pan out. It looked like he got it, but it's a pretty tight frame window, so it's not impossible to miss it either. But with that, we're on our way to Palace of Darkness. All those rupees we've been collecting this entire time to be spent on one single key, I guess, if you want to call Kiki.
Yeah, Kiki the monkey. So kind of a funny thing here. So Kiki, you have to pay him $10 or 10 rupees, sorry, to actually go over to Palace of Darkness, and then you also have to pay him 100 rupees to open Palace of Darkness. So the thing with Kiki is, as you're directing him towards the palace here, if Link gets hit, Kiki will run away, and you'll have to repay him $10 or 10 rupees to follow you again, which is kind of rough because we've only planned for the 110. So.
There's also a minor time save that you can get with Kiki as you're activating the entrance of this dungeon, Palace of Darkness. If you turn around right before you hit that cutscene trigger, that actually does bring Kiki closer to you and saves a little bit of time in that cutscene.
So routing in Palace of Darkness, Eriror is going to be doing quite a bit of mirroring. It's actually faster, specifically within the route itself. Just going back to the beginning and resetting the dungeon with the mirror. That also resets the items under the pots for Eriror, which he's actually collecting extra bombs, which we're going to need here in future dungeons.
Not only that, but for, well, two of them for a very important bomb jump that we'll get to see in this dungeon, also known as Hammer Yump. I'm really excited to see that. I wonder how many pause buffers we're going to see for this one.
Ideal, it would be 0 pause buffers, but for safety and just for double checking, I'd say Ari only does 1, possibly 2 at the most. But Hammer Yum can be pretty difficult. You actually have to line Link or line the bomb up on a certain Y coordinate pixel, and then once you have that correct, then you have to line Link up on a different specific Y coordinate pixel. So the bomb jump is extremely specific, but it does save some time then going forward and going into the basement of Pod and grabbing an extra key to get into the door.
I should confess, I only know how to do it bufferless because every time I try to do pause buffers, it's weird. It messes with my control. But we're gonna see that Hammer Yump here from Eriror. We're gonna pick up a bomb under this pot. Walking along the left edge actually makes us move a little bit quicker. Using 2 pause buffers, he lines it up and he gets a free one to switch to the mirror. Very nicely done.
Yeah, that was absolutely a fantastic hammer yump or hammer jump there. It is a pretty difficult trick to learn.
I'm just floored that you did it in 3. I mean, 2 of those are free because you need to switch items anyway. So that's basically 1 extra pause buffer. You can do pretty much, I think, is it 14 or 15 of them and still be faster than walking through the maze?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's up to 20, so.
And even failed attempts. I mean, so to be able to do that so cleanly in 1 try, that's fantastic. But the important thing, the sexy statue, I think we may have fallen apart on that one.
Yeah, that's kind of a goofy trick where you're able to transition from pushing it right to pushing it up. But going through Palace of Darkness here, getting to the back half, Eriror actually has a pretty healthy set of arrows.
Yeah, 8's definitely a good place to be at. The only unfortunate thing about this setup right now is that we've lost some health, so we don't have sword beams to work with. This will cost us 2 item switches here in the basement in the next room.
With the swag boom, definitely a strat that a lot of people use in all dungeons category, so it's a pretty awesome swag boom to see there.
I guess something like that just takes a lot of practice getting that perfect angle. You know, Super Nintendo D-pad not always entirely forgiving when it comes to certain inputs, but you know, if you practice enough.
Yeah, I mean that's what this game is all about, especially the no major glitches, just hitting specific, pixels and tricks, which is pretty tough. But Arian to Helmasaur fight here, which is the first boss of the Dark World. You need 17 hammer hits on his mask to blow it up, and then you need 3 hammer hits, or a couple of swings with the sword, or a sword release there, which will give you the tempered damage on a sword spin, but Eri does a fantastic job there.
This is typically a very scary fight for particularly new runners, but pretty much anybody at this point, because Helmasaur King will do 2 hearts of damage with any of his attacks. And starting in the first phase, you don't have more than 1 attack on screen at any time. But in the second phase, he can do all 3 of his attacks, which include moving towards you, swiping his tail, and fireballs. So to pull it off with this kind of RNG certainly looked very clean on our end. Eriror getting through, no problems. I do see a question in chat about safeties. Remains to be seen. You don't typically take a ton of safeties at the time threshold that Area runs at, but one thing that you may see commonly in tons of runs is just picking up powder. I don't know if you would pick up powder today, to be honest with you.
I'm going to say that Erir will not pick up powder. He's probably just going to stick with the sand cart safety. With the amount of runs and time Eri has spent on this category, I'm pretty confident that he's going to be confident in being able to do this without powder.
Yeah, the only reason I think he may even consider the otherwise is just for the fact that he's running this marathon. But that's a great point. I mean, and that's the differentiation too. Like a lot of people will drop safeties or think they need to drop safeties early on, but until you've run as many times as say Eriror has, when you've put in all the time and can actually dodge pretty much all of the damage sources, you won't need that powder at that point. But for pretty much everybody else trying to get into this game, I recommend you use the powder in your run.
And what you just saw there was a hammer dash from Erir. Basically, an item dashing, where so you're dashing and you're hitting the item selection button on the same frame, which will allow you to use the item and dash at the same time. So the hammer dash is used in quite a few places in this run.
It's also one of the nicer looking dashes. The only one I think looks cooler than that is the shovel dash, which we probably won't see.
Definitely not see a shovel dash in this category.
I think there are 1 or 2 categories where you might have it equipped. I'm trying to think of... No, I mean, there's no reason you wouldn't have it. Yeah. I don't know. Do you think someone would do that on the dig game screen in a 100% run?
I'm going to say no, because I think if you shovel dash, you don't pick up any extra items on digs.
That is true, actually. It only counts for the last tile you dig. I was thinking maybe like leaving the screen. Well, there's another spin speed, and that one's really important because we passed by one of the fastest guards in Hyrule. We call him Usain Bolt. That red guard is angry from the moment we enter the screen. Something to note here is that we we activate the flute from the left side of this square because we don't intend to actually flute away from here. This is a sign if you didn't know someone was going to drop powder. You would see them activated from like the S of that square. Going left here allows us to set up this dash a little bit quicker.
So Erir making his way over to the Dark World portal here, which he'll end up hammer dashing here and then picking up the rock and entering the portal from the left side, which will give him a much faster quick warp as he makes his way to Thieves Town.
Thieves Town is a very fun dungeon. Many people hate it. I can definitely understand why. We get to have one of the more straightforward bosses of this run. What we may even call it scripted. Blind is a fight that, if you've practiced it enough, should be pretty straightforward, but can easily go off rails. But this is definitely a big step up in difficulty. As far as how the original game was intended to be played, I mean, while you can get to certain places quicker, like this one, this is kind of intended to be the 4th dungeon. So we're supposed to be able to get a sword upgrade, or the Tempered Sword, right around after this dungeon, or maybe even as we complete the dungeon. Some people could have left the dungeon. So these enemies will do a lot more damage, and we're a little bit weaker against them.
Yeah, the actual intended route for the game is actually doing Swamp Palace after Palace of Darkness, which is the 2nd dungeon. So this particular route we will go a little off script as far as the numbered dungeons go.
We do this for a very important reason, though. The Titan's Mitts that we will pick up in this dungeon in the basement will give us access to the blacksmith chain that'll give us the tempered sword. We need this for certain boss kills. Mothiel has really improved by having it. And Argus, I guess, too. I mean, that's a big improvement.
Yeah, the tempered sword does quite a bit more damage than the master sword that Eriror currently has. So it's definitely beneficial to route this specific dungeon in as early as possible, so we can get a better damaged sword.
We make our trip up here to open up that hole in the ceiling to bring blind to the light. Of course, that does require some backtracking. There's a lot of easy places to take small bits of chip damage, I guess if you want to call it that. A heart here, a heart there. So being able to get through this as cleanly as possible is really important if you've dropped safeties like, say, bug net, bottle, powder. As newer runners will probably rely on them as a crutch in this dungeon. One thing that you can do is there are certain pots in this dungeon that have bubbles underneath them, or basically the things, bunny beams, most people call them, that'll turn you into a bunny. You can actually powder those before picking up the pot that they're underneath to get a fairy to appear. You cannot do it if you pick it up first.
Eriror just about to get the big chest here and grab his Titan's Mitts, and then make his way to the boss of this dungeon, which is Blind.
The fight that we're about to see is pretty straightforward. As you mentioned, each phase of the fight will be 3 hits from pretty much any weapon you can damage Blind with, although we'll use the sword in this particular run. You need to do 9 hits total, and every time you do 3 hits, one of the heads will separate from the boss and start shooting randomly at, or so it seems, at you. I believe it's every 4th shot will actually track Link's position.
Yep, and this fight is actually scripted. So as long as you're hitting Blind in the right movement, in the right timing, you don't have to worry about the fireballs. They're going to be in the same places every time. So it's a pretty easy fight once you get the hang of the actual script for Blind.
The timing and execution on that was excellent. Having Blind die almost not even touching the light at all, which pretty much is within a small handful of frames of optimal.
Yeah, it was a very clean fight from Eriror.
Now, if you were to die in that fight, it would be very costly because Blind would not start in the same position, and you would not have the advantage of being able to easily get up to the top of the screen without, risking some damage. A lot of people will walk back into that fight with sword beams if they have to do that and try and take some swings from the other side of the room. Thankfully, Eriror doesn't have to do that today. After mashing some text, we'll make our way to, we'll go pick up some rupees first.
Yeah, so on the way here, Eriror is going to pick up 300 rupees in this bomb hut chest. And after getting the temper sword, he'll also stop at a house better known as the Sea House to get another 300 rupee chest. This will set us up for getting flippers here shortly after the Skull Woods dungeon.
I'm a little confused, Figure 22. It's called the Sea House, but why isn't it by the shore?
That's a good question. I know they call it the Sea House because it's shaped like a sea, but it definitely should be near the shore.
I think in a moment I might see your point. In the meantime, we'll have to take a portal to bring back this blacksmith. Unfortunately, you have to talk to the blacksmith, pay 10 rupees, and enter and re-enter to do all this. And of course, we'll take advantage of the portal to kind of do that for us. Because that counts as having been away for a while.
Yeah, definitely a lot of text here. Basically just saying, hey, it costs 10 rupees to get your upgraded sword. And then it's like, thank you for paying 10 rupees. So definitely a lot of extra text in this blacksmith scene.
We just turned him from a frog into a blacksmith and he wants us to pay for this?
I know, right? It should be free.
That being said, it pretty much is the most free damage upgrade we could possibly hope for. One thing you saw Eriror do there is he went up to the ledge and actually tapped A in order to jump off that ledge with a sick fence dash.
Confirmed. Save 20 years. Fence dash.
I hope everybody in chat is hyped for that, because that is the most excitement you will ever see in any speedrun in history. Just gonna put it out there.
So Eriror making his way through the Lost Woods here to the entrance of Skullwoods. About to head it into everyone's favorite mummy room, which can either go fairly well or go very wrong.
They just want a hug. And that hug hurts a lot.
Shout outs to Stuck Mummy on the left.
You just want to be a bro. So we call that mummy Stuck Mummy if you get him in that position against the wall, because the entire room is significantly easier as you're trying to pull that statue onto the switch. If you don't have to worry about two of those Gibdos at once, maneuvering around one is way simpler.
So Eriror's about to set himself up to bomb jump to get the fire out here.
You may have noticed that he releases a sword spin as he's approaching the ledge. That's actually taking advantage of a game mechanic. The game does not want you to release a sword spin unless you're standing on solid ground, and will even push you back onto the ledge to do so. It happens to be a very convenient setup for trying to do bomb jumps. There is actually a key that we can pick up underneath the pot here, and that's an important one. Saves us a little bit of backtracking, or I guess roundabouting. We equip the fire rod as well because we need this just to enter the back half of the dungeon, and despite missing a shot, we will get in. I love that key dash setup, nudging into that block.
Looks like Eriror had a really nice mummy heckway there. That room can be pretty difficult to do with all the lamps and torches you got to light along with the mummies that you have to escape. But getting hit with the bunny beam here, wasting a little bit of time.
He's also very low on health. Mothula's attacks will do 2 hearts of damage. Getting hit by a spike will do 1. Not even opting to pick up the heart in the top left. This boss fight can be done exceptionally fast if you get a good poke dash strat going.
Yeah, he's going to set up to dash through him and hit him on the block here. What a close fight there. Fantastic job from Eriror. With one remaining heart, he gets the last hit on Mothula. So with Mothula, it's kind of structured a little goofy. You can't hit Mothula into the spikes because the spike damage overrides your damage. So anytime that you swipe Mothula with your sword and he bounces into the spikes, you're not going to do any damage to him. So it's really important to keep him off the spikes, or to hit Mothula at an angle that forces him toward the middle of the arena there, so he doesn't get hit by a spike. So Eriror did a fantastic job. Good fight.
If you happen to have more magic to work with, you can also take advantage of that fire rod, which is of course a great ranged weapon, but it also kind of bounces Mothula a little bit further than, say, a sword swipe typically would. So you can kind of unstick him from the wall, or melt them off the wall, I guess, if you want to call it that. As a backup, Eriror did not have that option, just opted to dive right in and took advantage of the 1 heart he had to spare. That was exceptional.
So Eriror is going to take a little shopping trip here, and when he dashes off this hill here, he actually activates his flute for the bird. Now, he doesn't want to get picked up by the bird, but this specific input is going to set the bird's altitude. I don't want to get too specific on it, but it has to do with the newly found spooky glitch that's going to happen in Misery Mire. But he actually set the altitude specifically here to be able to use the fire rod much earlier in the first room of Ice Palace, which you will see.
And I guess a basic way to explain why we would even care about storing these values, a lot of sprites and a lot of items use the same values if you don't overwrite them. So that altitude value will have, as Fricker22 mentioned before, implications later on that save us some frames. We do have another frame saver coming up here. We'll see a dash against the wall here in a bonk. This sets us up to be on a perfect pixel to do a quick warp as long as you only walk north or south from this position.
I mean, not only does it set you up for the quick warp to save time, but it looks super cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You got to be hovering in midair. I mean, Link is a legend after all. And so, I mean, I may have been upset about 10 rupees before, but these flippers.
Yeah, they're pretty pricey. Curious what Zora is going to do with all these rupees.
And what is Zora going to do with all these rupees? Honestly, I'm not sure what I would do with all those rupees. We do pick up quite a lot of excess rupees. We don't really need rupees for anything beyond this point, if I recall correctly. And part of that is just the way that it's convenient to pick up those 2 300 drops. We also had previous routes in the past that would have you picking up rubies in Eastern Palace and Palace of Darkness. There were lots of ways to get to these, and some people do still vary because they run the old route.
So, like I mentioned earlier, just setting that that flute value with the bird. Eriror is actually going to throw out his fire rod to hit this enemy quite early. Normally, you'd have to wait for that freezer to fully exit his spot in the wall there.
I definitely think that's one of the cooler implementations of this new spooky glitch.
Yeah, and the name itself, Spooky Glitch, is definitely befitting for this.
If everything works as planned, later on in Misery Mire, we'll be able to do that to hit things from a distance, through walls even. Part of the reason we call it that, or at least the genesis of that name. Ice Palace here, though, this is an excellent dungeon to showcase just how fast the speedrun is compared to intended mechanics. We're gonna skip pretty much half of it, if not more.
Yeah, so the intended path in this dungeon is to go deep into the dungeon and follow it all the way to the back half of the right side to pick up the big key, which will also allow you to get the upgraded mail or armor for Link, which is going to be the blue mail. But since we're going to skip half the dungeon, we don't need the big key to fight the boss. We're going to skip the blue mail and just go right after Cold Stare.
Now, that exceptionally clean bomb jump that you just saw him do is often called the Ice Palace bomb jump. He also follows it with a hammer dash, which is very nice looking. It's always fun to see. That is the reason we can skip half the dungeon. There's a switch that we need to normally activate and backtrack and all of that. So, I mean, I would say that saves, what, 3 or 4 minutes at least?
Yeah, right around there.
And just like this, we were on the right side of the block. We get to push it right down. Now, there are other ways to route the game. You could actually do this after Misery Mire if you wish to, allowing you to have the Cane of Samaria if you don't want to do the bomb jump. Still some strange routing to get around that, but there is some routes out there where people will choose to do this. That is one of the nice things about NMG is while we do kind of have a favored optimal route in that sense, it's not so different when you shuffle a couple of things around that it's not viable to run it differently. Oh boy. Cold Stare here, a very dangerous fight if it gets off the rails and kind of off script. Eriror is going to take advantage of some of these lag frames to line up his next shots carefully. We also see Eriror in chat trolling us a little bit about potentially dying to Cold Stare.
So Cold Stare, it's a pretty tough boss. Just to reiterate exactly what Erie did there, he had to use the fire rod to shoot 8 shots at the block of ice that's protecting Cold Stare. So if you end up having to miss a shot there, it's pretty much mirror out of the dungeon. But Cold Stare hits like an actual truck. So at this point in Ice Palace, because we skipped half the dungeon, we skipped the big chest, we skipped the blue mail, we're supposed to be protected a little bit more. So with the green mail, Cold Stare actually does 4 hearts of damage. So he hits pretty hard. And if you end up accidentally dying to Cold Stare, you actually have to farm magic to get back through the dungeon. So Eri had a little bit of a Cold Stare party, but he handled it exceptionally well. So great fight.
And you may see in tournament settings, if someone were to, or even head-to-head settings, I guess, where you would want to do an NMG race, some people will actually go to another dungeon if they die, simply to try to get the magic refill from the boss encounter. So there are plenty of ways to respond to these things, although farming for magic is kind of what you hope for, because those pickles outside can sometimes give you a full drop. Well, I think it's time we finally went to Swamp.
Swamp is a fun dungeon. Just before that portal there, you saw Eriror kill the Akarok, which will actually save you some frames on that screen, as well as entering that portal from the left side, giving him the quick warp, just to save a little bit more on time there.
Yeah, lag reduction, a very important part of this game. Some screens are just naturally very laggy, particularly Thieves Town, where you have a lot of different like sections of a room loaded at the same time. The way the game loads rooms, they're called super tiles. It's just groupings of rooms, and the number of sprites active in those can be very relevant. So you'll see certain tactics being done in certain rooms and segments of the game where we try to limit the number of enemies on screen as well.
So Swamp Palace here. So it's not particularly a tough dungeon because the intended route of the playthrough here is to do this dungeon second, right after pod. So it doesn't necessarily do a lot of damage in this dungeon, but a couple of things with it. There's a lot of enemies. There's a lot of RNG. So a lot of people refer to this dungeon as basically bleeding time or death by 1,000, enemies here. But along with that, there's a lot of water, and the water does slow down your Link's walking animation. So movement is very important in this dungeon, as well as being able to react to specific RNG that you get.
This is also one of the heavier sections of swimming in the game, which is its own kind of strange movement mechanic. You can even pump while swimming, although it has different effects and kind of behaves in very strange, wonky ways. But exactly as Figure 22 mentioned, there are a ton of opportunities to take damage. And some runners do actually die in Swamp Palace after trying some aggressive room strats. We will pick up a key here and then walk over to the other side of this peg switch that we see in that room in order to fill the water. It's actually possible to flood the key, and you have to actually restart the dungeon if you were to walk in here, say, with the hookshot and a randomizer. Thankfully, we never have to deal with that in NMG, so that is a very nice feeling.
But not being able to flood the key, the one thing that you can do in the No Major Glitches run here is forget to hit that switch on the way out, which Eri did not do, or I should say did not forget to do. Could be pretty painful because you have to make your way all the way to the left side here to get the big key. And once you drop down the hole, you can see that the pegs are up and you can't get to the key, so then you have to backtrack again. So one of the things that can go wrong in this dungeon.
I'm not entirely sure which I'd be more frustrated by, to be honest. Although I do know exactly how it feels to find those pegs up after you've done all of this just to get over to this side.
Yeah, I think everybody's had that scenario happen before, one time or another.
Well, the good news is that we are... Oh, nice chest turn, by the way. That's a one-frame trick that you can do. You can turn around and change direction the one frame immediately after opening one. That's actually... I mean, if you hit every single one of them in the game, I think you... And you miss just one, I think you would lose time. That's something that I've heard floated around somewhere. But yeah, so now we're going to pick up our hook shot, and this is actually a very important item for both the run and, of course, general movement. By lining up with a statue heading up to that chest, you can do a diagonal southeast and line up perfectly to get a second hook shot through the two railings to pick up that key. That's actually very specific. You have to be on an exact pixel or Y coordinate pixel for that.
So Eriror coming up on a very questionable room here. I would just love to know who designed a switch right next to a spiral staircase.
Yeah, not the best thing ever. You can actually get yourself into a pretty funny but annoying glitch state when it comes to those staircases, depending on if you bonk into certain things. But that's one that tends to be a particular culprit. You'll consistently climb up and down the stairs until. Actually, do you know how are you supposed to escape that? I never remember that.
I don't think that happens too often in NMG.
Either way, though, the turnstile there, a rude awakening. We will flood that room so we can progress. And we have an interesting boss fight coming up here. We may see an attempt at something called the zero cycle Argus fight, and he's going for it. Oh, so close. So what you saw there was Eriror was using an item dash with the hook shot while the sword was outstretched, which means you basically have to have 3 buttons held. If you prime that hook shot every single time that you pull one of those in, you can continuously stab them and kill them very quickly. If you do so fast enough, the boss will not do any of those circular attacks. Even though we killed all of the puffs pretty quickly, he still attempted to do that circle, so we call that a 1 cycle.
Yeah, it was a very good fight by Eriror there, almost with the zero cycle, but just dropping on the last puff there. But once that cycle was completed, Eriror did switch to the fire rod and get the quick kill on Argus, which does save a little bit of time.
Yeah, that was definitely impressive to watch. Even attempting zero cycle is really difficult. It's by far the most difficult boss strat in this entire game, and it doesn't even save that much time. It just looks amazing. I mean, what would you say? That's probably like 5 seconds.
On average, about 5 to 6. Yep.
Either way, I'm impressed. Eriror showing some really excellent execution today. I also want to compliment the man on his mashing. We did not waste very much time in any text boxes as far as I can see.
Yeah, the crystal cutscene at the end of Swamp Palace there is actually the longest crystal cutscene of the entire run.
So those of you who are familiar with this game may be wondering why we're going up Death Mountain. We're definitely not going to Turtle Rock yet. The reason we're heading up here is to pick up the Ether Medallion off of the Ether Tablet just west of Tower of Hera. This is kind of what we mentioned before, a bit of a shopping trip. We're likely to pick up the Ice Rod here after this, although some runners do so after Misery Mire, and it really doesn't make a big difference either way. Unfortunately, getting dead rocked.
Yeah, that dead rock going across left on the bridge was pretty unfortunate, but on his way up the mountain there, you guys saw a minor glitch trick that involved the spin speed. You can actually hook dash to get spin speed as well, rather than just releasing your sword. But what Eriror did there is when you have the hook shot, you can hold your sword out and do what they call a hook climb, is basically doing a hook item dash with your sword out, which will allow Link's movement to free up a little bit going upstairs. So that's why he was climbing that long staircase on the left side of the mountain so quickly.
And I think that gets you to pretty much like dashing speed on a staircase.
Pretty close, yeah. Plus, he did double pump on the way up, so it did speed up his movement.
And you can even combine that with that sword spin at the very end of the staircase to get spin speed yet again. Chaining that all together is really nice. We did see him pick up the rock here from the south to get the bird to leave the screen a little bit higher on the screen. This is Eriror setting up that altitude variable that we mentioned earlier on, which will hopefully be able to use with that specific value to hit a switch through a wall.
In a few rooms, actually, so definitely part of the spooky glitch.
Yeah, that's right. We do it 3 times in a row. And that's part of why it saves as much as 10 seconds. It's been quite a revelation for the community. previously, before the discovery, because Zelda did pick up a new world record not long after the tournament.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, saving a handful of seconds there, and then of course other runners who were also in contention for that world record getting very close as well. I believe WQ is just 1 second behind Zelda right now.
Yeah, Zelda actually has the world record at 1:23:10, and WQ right behind at 1:23:11. So, yep.
It's amazing to see so many developments in this community lately. Misery Mire being pretty much central to it. This dungeon's very confusing for a new player of the game, but very straightforward for a speedrunner. We go to that room to steal one key, bring it over to the left side of the dungeon. We're going to pick up the big key after the torch cutscene, and then immediately make our way to the basement after we pick up the Canis Samaria. This is a good room, this torch room, as kind of a benchmark for your run if you want to get a sense of how much longer you have left, presuming everything goes well. It's usually about, what is it, 20 minutes?
Yeah, about 20 minutes. So Eri is on pace for a high 125, low 126 run right now. And just a correction, it would be 20 minutes.
Well, this is another one of the cutscenes from a wall transition. This opens up this room that we're in, of course, so that we can see the hole on the ground. We'll pick up that big key, make our way through a teleport, and then we need to get back to the main room of the dungeon so that we can head on over and get that big chest. Something to note about Misery Mire, as we get to these later Dark World dungeons, the enemy difficulty significantly increases. There's so many more of them. They all do more damage for the most part. And this is where, like, if you are considering in your runs to drop powder, this is going to hurt a lot. In this dungeon, in Thieves Town, places where you can get these anti-fairies and turn them into fairies with the powder, sorely missed at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Dropping powder for newer runners, this particular dungeon is pretty tough, mainly because the strategy used to kill Vitreous, which is the boss of this dungeon, you take intentional damage quite a bit by going in as acid puddles while you sword spin the eyes. So already going in there with low hearts and no powder is a pretty scary boss fight.
We'll cover that a little bit more in a moment. Now it's time for that spooky action glitch. We saw the setup for it. So we stored that altitude value. I believe it's on slot 4. And normally the cane would use this, but we're going to use a dash right before it to kick us some dust, which actually counts as one of those sprites, and then drop the block. So we force the game to use the 4th slot. Basically, we forced the game to use the slot we stored the altitude on when we switched to Fire Rod on this screen, allowing us to hit the switch way above us from quite a distance away. We'll do it again in this room. You have to make sure you hit something, so we actually have to hit that anti-fairy in order to line up the shot. And we'll do it one more time in this room against this torch to hit the switch above this staircase. All right, so it's time for that damage boost strat we talked about. Eriror actually does equip the bow just in case, but we're going to take the 1 damage that we get from the slime instead of the multiple hearts that we get from touching the eyeballs. With these sword spins, Eriror pulls off a 0-cycle Vitreous exceptionally.
Yeah, it was a very clean fight from Eriror there with the 0-cycle.
You know, if you're doing it optimally, you'll take 4 hearts of damage, at the most, or at the minimum, excuse me. But to have 5 in this setup with no extra safeties, Eriror really kicking butt. I see it in chat, and I've seen people do this in runs before, but Fricker22, have you ever mirrored before finishing this fight?
Regrettably, yes, I have, because obviously shooting that last arrow at Vitreous and then being able to immediately switch to the mirror does help a little bit of timeout on this next screen. And then having be one arrow short on Vitreous and then going, oh, I need to shoot one more arrow, but forgetting that you switch to the mirror. Yep, I've seen it quite a few times.
Well, thankfully, no such thing today for Eriror. We're going to head back up Death Mountain because it's time to do Turtle Rock, which is basically supposed to be the penultimate dungeon. Oh,
The Waffle House strat was so pretty.
holy moly. So those dead rocks, not very friendly at all. We saw before the hook dash get the super speed, but to be able to get through all of those rocks without touching a single one of them, barely even using, well, didn't even have to use the hook shot to stun any of them. You know, I gotta ask, Fricker. Maybe you can explain this better than I can. Where did that originate from? The reference.
I believe it was from a runner. His name is Waffle. I believe he kind of came up with it. Also, being able to discover that you can hit the squirrels multiple times with sword beam and hook shot, and as they turn purple and go to stone, right before that there is some time where you can hit them again, and you can just continuously move the dead rocks and basically just move them wherever you want to, as long as you're hitting them, prior to them being fully stoned. So being able to do that a little bit quicker with the hook shot, and if a dead rock gets in your way, you can hook shot them multiple times. So
There's also a very unfortunate but hilarious clip of Waffle 42 out there somewhere. Just it reads just "I quit" as the title. It's just him being unfortunately stuck between like 3 or 4 different dead rocks and just having no chance of movement. That's the unfortunate thing about Death Mountain is there are a lot of situations where there really is no good choice. You're gonna take damage. Really liking these hookshot damage avoidances, or the iframes being used. While you have the hookshot extending or retracting, you actually cannot take any damage, so using that to avoid some of the rollers there.
Eri coming up on everyone's favorite room in this dungeon, the Chain Chomps, which can have some pretty interesting RNG here. Does take a hit from the right Chain Chomp, but gets through cleanly.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to see a lot of people die in that room. Did we happen to get a fairy drop? I don't think we did.
I didn't see one yet. The fairies we usually drop on the pokies. So the first one he killed, I don't think I saw it.
And that being the case, we definitely haven't seen a hard drop, or we may have seen a hard drop earlier, but we definitely didn't get the fairy at any point before here. So those Hokuboku could potentially still give him the drop, and it would still be favorable.
So the few drops from the prize pack that Eri's looking for, obviously the fairy at this point, looks like he did get lasered through that door. But he's looking for the fairy, and he's also looking for the full magic drop, which should be coming up here, possibly both on the second Poke Room.
Well, it looks like chat's confirming we did have one on the first Pokey, so hopefully that magic drop, as you mentioned.
Oh, we apologize. We must have missed that one. But yeah, the full magic jar should be the next drop here in the next Poke Room.
And these 2 Pokies we're about to walk into have 16 different RNG combinations, I believe. It's probably one of the more frequently practiced enemy rooms.
Yeah, 16 RNG variations is quite high for that room.
And a little bit of a fun fact being on display here from Eriror, you can actually dash into most bombable walls that have that physical appearance. Or not most of them, though. There's 2 of them, I believe, that look like that, and pretty much all the ones that have a circular design around them are bonkable.
Looks like Chad was saying that the first Poke Room, had both the drops, so.
Yeah, so now that we've passed most of that, it's not likely that Eriror is going to go out of his way to kill a Hokuboku. But the Pokies, as mentioned, very handy. Now, we do get to see a really nice skip here, a laser bridge skip. The front of the laser is the only part that actually can damage you, so if you time it right, you can dash right past it. Any shot would have killed him there.
Yeah, normally the big chest in this dungeon is the mirror shield, which would block the lasers, but luckily there is a nice timed dash to be able to skip it.
Don't pokies do 4 hearts of damage too?
They certainly do. So they hit like a truck. Pretty much everything hits like a truck in this dungeon, especially just still being on green mail.
He was just pixels away from walking into death on that last one. Ooh boy, and we're actually pretty low on the health here as well for the Trinex fight. Doing the back door strats, which is a little bit quicker, but also a little riskier. So far, pulling it off, just got to watch out for the head and should be able to get through phase 1.
Yeah, for that pokey there, he actually used the switch with the block, and he got iframes, so the pokey wouldn't have hit him there.
Oh wow, that was really close. Took an extra hit of damage, the 1 heart of damage, right before getting back into position for that sword spin. If you were clenching before, chat, stay tuned. We still have an entire Ganon's Tower to finish up, as well as the Ganon fight itself.
So Ganon's Tower, I feel like this is one of the favorite dungeons for most of the speedrunners in this category. Just because, one, you're nearing the end, the anticipation is getting quite high, but mainly because so many of the rooms in Ganon's Tower requires just so many quick movements, but a lot of really cool minor glitches and tricks that you can do, and they just happen so fast and they're so frequent, almost all the way through the top of the tower. So we're going to see a lot of really cool stuff here from Eriror.
All right, well, as the story goes, we have actually just found our princess in another crystal. We are on our way to a castle of sorts with all 7 of those crystals in tow. And I guess this is the part where, kind of like in Ocarina of Time, we use those 7 sages. With that, though, we will open up the tower. You cannot actually access this tower at all until you've completed all 7 crystal dungeons in the Dark World. And then from here, we're not actually going to spend that much time exploring Ganon's Tower. I don't think there's really anybody out there who goes to the right side to go through, although you can do either left or right. The key is that we're trying to get down to the basement to defeat the Ice Armos fight and pick up the big key in the room right behind it.
So coming up here in a few short rooms, you're going to see Eriror do kind of a few quick tricks with the hook shot and the boomerang to get through a few of these switch rooms fairly quickly.
Other routes of or other runs of the game, say like all dungeons or no EG and that stuff, we'll have you do stuff like bonk strats to get through that room. There are a lot of different ways to approach Ganon's Tower. NMG is definitely not the only flavor of Z3 that folks out there should be keeping their eyes out for. Keep an eye out for the ALTTP directory in general. Sometimes you'll see people running some of these less commonly seen runs. NMG, very highly practiced, and Ganon's Tower is an excellent example of that execution.
Yeah, this tower at this level on this category does take a lot of focus and execution. Eriror is going to bonk over that portal there, which will save a little bit of time, and by picking up the bottom arrow pot here and then bonking across, he'll actually have enough arrows for Ice Armos, which is 18 needed.
Now, that won't be enough for us to finish the dungeon. What we'll do after this is pick up 10. He has to pick up the arrows in the chest behind the big key.
Correct. Just to get through the first couple rooms, he'll need arrows to kill 4 mimics.
You may have noticed that the Armos Knights didn't start circling the room until they all reached their resting position. That's true for either of the Armos fights and can be very handy if you want to put yourself into a better spot to finish up. And another excellent looking chest turn from Eriror there. Always nice to get the swag in.
Now, the Mimic Room coming up here that you're going to see from Eriror is actually pretty tough to do just because they're separated in the strat being able to use to have them follow you it can be pretty difficult for newer runners.
At absolute minimum, we'll need 8 arrows to get through this section, so that's part of why we had to pick up those 10 before. But you could miss, and the second room at least has some pots that you can pick up, giving you an opportunity to kind of replenish your ammo. You hope not to be in that position. Dashing through, wow, that was a really nice dash.
Yeah, getting the Ganon Ball Z dash.
Well, next up on the next episode is the Gauntlet. The Gauntlet being a series of rooms that are basically kill rooms that could definitely deplete your health and magic depending on how you approach it. Most runners will try to use the bow and arrow until the ice rooms start happening, where you start taking advantage of that fire rod. I'm just really impressed that he managed to pull off that dash. We are coming up on an opportunity to revisit our Lamolus fight. The entire Gans Tower trip is pretty much a rehash of the entire Light World in one sense of the word.
So coming up here, you're going to see kind of a cool strat with the cane being able to kill all the Wizrobes in the next 2 rooms, which is really cool looking.
Well, that one's a little bit easier to pull off by just placing it in one spot. The next one's really a little bit more challenging. You have to place it on a conveyor belt and line it up and still get the sword swipe on the last one in the top right. If you do it right, like Eriror did, it looks really slick. In this room, you have to be very careful about your timing in order to get these torches. With very low magic to work with, Eriror is forced to use Lamp for all but the last one, which is kind of common for most runners who are going to use the Fire Rod against Lamolus, although there are opportunities to pick up a small magic pot if you like to deviate for a few frames.
So here you're coming up on the Moldorm refight right after this room here.
That room's also one place where people who are reluctant to drop powder may actually take advantage of a minor glitch called fake powder, which you can use if you did pick up the mushroom but didn't turn in the powder. You can also use it if you have powder. If you deplete your magic, you can switch to powder and it'll automatically use it, even if you only have a mushroom on that slot. It can be kind of handy if you don't want to take the time to flute over to the mushroom or flute over to the potion shop, and is kind of a backup for people who don't want to completely drop it yet.
All right, so the Aghanim 2 fight here, the first one you're going to be able to get energy balls from all 3, and then after that it's just going to be a 50-50 chance coming from the main Aghanim. But basically having to reflect the energy balls from the 2 Aga clones off to the real one, which is a darker black circle here. Gary does a nice job, but it can be pretty difficult. A lot of people call him the math wizard just because you have to set up specific angles which refer to geometry to get through the fight, which can kind of stink if you get really bad RNG, but you're pulling pretty well through this fight.
A friend of mine in the randomizer community by the name of the Profe Gamer gave me a nice one. He called it trigonometry.
Interesting. That's I have not heard that before.
Yeah, I nearly lost it when I heard that. But we are moving on to the Ganon fight, the penultimate fight of the entire game. We are fully equipped that we're going to be walking into this with. There are 4 phases to this fight. We'll do 3 slashes and a sword spin against the trident here to try to get ourselves to 12 total hits very quickly, a sword spin being equivalent to 2. We need to do this for both of the first 2 phases in order to increment them.
Aerie pulling off very clean dash strats inside the circle again in there, which can be a little bit scary.
Always nice to see a smooth 1+1 Ganon, though. Those 2 phases very easy to lose time on. Now, of course, we don't pick up the silver arrows in this run, although if you are new to the run, you absolutely can. There's no reason that you can't. It's just kind of time costly to go pick them up. And if you did that, you'd probably pick up the gold sword as well. But in order to do the full damage, we're first going to get a torch glitch, which you can activate. Oh no!
Yeah, that can happen. So Ari went for the double spin on going for the torch glitch, and since he spun off Ganon on the bottom side, it kind of bounced him towards the edge where he had to hold up to prevent from falling. But it looked like he really wanted to try to get back and hit the torch to get the glitch, and then he let go of holding up, which made him fall, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that torch glitch is very valuable if you're doing silverless. Hopefully, we can get another good 1+1 out of this. The RNG doesn't seem to be too uncooperative. But if you can light that left torch before the right one goes out, I mean, that's half as much magic as it takes normally to, keep the torches lit. It allows you to use the fire rod to get extra hits for that last cycle. So, there we were opting to, redo the fight in this manner with a full magic meter, which is nice.
Also using the hook shot to extend it out and get iframes to not get hit by the bats.
Oh my. Getting real close to those fire bats as well, which are not quite lethal yet, but would definitely be a lot of damage. One thing that does stink about this fight is the amount of times the Ganon warps is random. You just never know. It could be quite a few, it could be almost none.
All right, Ari, you're getting the torch glitch there. Basically being able to light the left torch right as it goes out, and also being able to light it before the right torch goes out. We'll put it in the glitch state, so the right torch is always lit, so you only have to worry about the left one.
And at this point, we use a sword spin to try and hit Ganon on the first available frame where he actually is vulnerable. The game is not supposed to work this way. You're supposed to stun Ganon when you hit him. But within that small window, you can land these sword spins. You need 12 of them total to defeat Ganon with the Tempered Sword. And you can actually do slashes within the very first couple frames of that animation. But that's enough to defeat Ganon. And in a moment here, when we walk into the Triforce room, we'll be done with the entire run. And a big old congratulations to Eriror for his 127.34.77. An excellent time, despite the Ganon fall.
Let's get your GGs in chat. Let's support Eriror here. Like Yuta was saying, yeah, it was even despite the Ganon fall, it was still a very good run, and things can happen, but Eriror held his composure and did very well there.
I mean, I still consider 130 to be a benchmark time, and Eriror absolutely crushing it. Nice to see.
Oh, absolutely. Especially getting that sub 130 time can be pretty hard for a lot of runners, and that's definitely the first benchmark and of getting the time in the no major glitches category.
All right, now, so my favorite part of any NMG run, or I guess any Link to the Past run, the best end credits theme in all of gaming.
Well, the game itself just has fantastic music too, so.
Well, as it looks like we're about to be wrapping this up so that we can get the next run going, I'd like to thank Fricker22 for joining me on the commentary, and I'd like to thank Eriror for running this for us today. It's really great to see NMG back on speed gaming.
Yeah, I had a fantastic time. Thank you so much for doing the commentary with me, Yuda. And extra shout outs to Eriror and such a fantastic no major glitches category run. I believe the next run coming up is the Mega Man X randomizer. So I'll close this guy out. Thank you so much, chat. Thank you for all the GGs for Eriror, and continue to enjoy the rest of this fantastic marathon.
And get your hype in chat for Unknown Availability, who will be spearheading that Mega Man X randomizer run. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.